Ми продовжуємо наш сьогоднішній захід. Мене звати
We resume our today's event. I'm Daria Kaleniuk, and I'm executive director of AntAC. And today we have Mykhailo Fedorov with us, who is Minister of Digitalization in Ukraine. What are Ukraine's achievements in anti-corruption work during the last 7 years, and how do you see the next 7 years, and what are expectations from the Ministry of Digitalization? How can you promote this anti-corruption work? And today, Frank Paul even mentioned that Ukraine, in terms of digitalization, is better than some EU countries, and that he rely on your ministry in anti-corruption work. So what is your vision of these things? I've been working in the Ministry of digitalization for 2 years now, and I feel that that digitalization could be only one tool in anti-corruption work. Why only one? Because the process themselves should be clear and understandable, and then you may go digital with those processes and digitalize the procedures. For example, today we are able to demonstrate how much money could be saved by Ukrainians when they go for some digitalized services, for example, like business registration. When the service is digital, up to 70% of all businesses now could be registered online without actually wasting no time. In the past, if you were a resident of a small city or town, you had to go to bigger center, and they wasted time, money, and while now there's saved money, these are money saved by people. These are 80 million of hryvnia. Although before we realized that the corruption there was almost unnoticeable. The next is, for example, construction sector. Recently, we had launched the digitalized service of informing the state that you want to start some construction project, your private construction project, and many aspects of this registration, construction services now are digitalized. Starting to do that, we wasted a lot of time trying to understand where the construction register was, and we found out that the register was in private hands. It was beyond the Ukrainian territory, and the access to it was regulated with login and different codes. Then we had analyzed that register together with the NABU SBU and brought it back to Ukraine and we found out that there was a special script in that register which calculated carefully the bribe that had to be requested when you tried to register some piece of property in that register. And now we had created a new register, new big system. Now the construction inspection is cancelled. And thus we had subjected that primary register to re-engineering, and this actually resulted in absolutely new services. This illustrates that first you need to have a good product which contains the right procedure, and then this internal logic of that right procedure could be digitalized, and only in this case you will get best results. For example, having analyzed that script, vulnerable script, which requested bribes for registration of the square meters, we saved some 3 billion hryvnia. The next item is about open data. We were among the initiators of the opening of information from companies who are corporate taxpayers. Before doing that, we had a lot of journalist investigations. Now, this data will become open. This year, we will look at the internet coverage allowances, that is how the national budget allocations for the internet coverage in scarcely populated areas are used, and how bribes are requested by big companies. So doing that digital service, we had to analyze the internet coverage in Ukraine, understand which areas are not covered with good internet, and then we produced a map and found out where the coverage was the poorest, and then brought providers on the map also. And this allowed us to understand how to select the new service providers for the non-covered regions. In order to launch any project in Ukraine, you should predict where the abuse is possible, where the misuse is possible. And then you should make an anti-fraud system and prevent this from happening. Is that true that you find those tiny offenders who develop counter software or invent the ways for frauds and employ them? Yes, once that happened. So in the result of our survey, we understood where the hidden possibilities for corruption existed and prevented this situation. Thus, we use open data in internet coverage, in construction, or development, new development registration. And this allows broad public to check whether the developers' offers about new construction, whether they are officially registered or not. Governmental services actually mean that the state is ready to resolve the issues that people have. And that's why the policy which is to be implemented by the ministries has to be clear has to be clear to ordinary people. When we established our ministry, we from the very beginning developed a good communication policy. That's why we have a public dashboard of all the projects, and this allowed us to digitalize our procurements and save some 6 billion hryvnia on the public procurement. That's why this illustrates how these transparent instruments allow to save money for the state. This shows how much money could be retained for the budget. Actually, all the public procurement procedures, they pass through your ministry. Some ministries and agencies, they try to hide their public procurement procedures, but those who are honest, they communicate them to us. And we may prevent payment for the contracts which exceed some threshold amounts. Yes, we also analyze how the tenders match the criteria. And also we control the quality of public procurement procedures, and then the Chamber of Accounts controls or monitors the compliance with legislation. One of the latest cases, subvention for the procurement of laptops. We developed the terms of reference and recommended terms of reference to the Ministry of Education. And describe technical conditions. And we based our tours on actual criteria and disseminated the request for quotations and later on, together with SBU, we have found one person who actually committed a fraud. He persuaded all the participants that they should charge 5,000 more per each laptop. This allowed perpetrators to get 300 million additionally, and together with SBU, we revealed that. And now the prices went down and we saved 160 million. Thus, we managed to preserve corruption, to prevent corruption schemes. That is, if you wish to curb corruption, you may succeed and digitalization may help you. But in order to do this, you have to design the right process. For our ministry, the ideal service, this is the service without bureaucrats at all, fully digitalized services. From December 1st, we will launch the change in registration, in the place of registration, and this will be done totally automatical. 6 billion is saved via the procurement tenders on hardware and software of state authority. That's impressive. Under Yanukovych rule, we read a lot of tenders, and that was terrible. During the previous panel, much was said about environmental issues, about environmental background assessment. They have some plans related to the environment. That's true. That currently we are negotiating with the Ministry of Environment, and we plan to launch a special project where we'll do tracing of the timber circulation around the country, and next year we expect to get both political and operational support, and also money will be allocated in the budget for these projects. I mean environmental projects. The ministry chooses its focus depending on the scale of services demanded. Currently, we offer to administer and to request for pensions, for social payments online, and I believe that this news about environment will sound good for those who stand for it. You mentioned something about national budget. Do you are you happy with the amount of money allocated for your services? We had built up our team. We have good experts. Actually, we have good operational management, and now we may scale up this good practice all over the country. And I believe that since 2023, the budget will become substantial for us. By now, we existed more as a startup and had to prove the usefulness of our ministry. And we had clearly demonstrated that COVID-19 certificates might be very useful, and etc. Now we may scale up all our digital projects, and later this will require more investment.
Останнє питання.
One more question. I heard from our international partners, they ask you have DS, they said, you are progressive. Why it is so difficult to take decisions and there is no digitalization inside the state? In order to take a decision, one should go to different ministries with paper documents. Do you have plans to improve the situation, this digitalization in state management? We should consider concrete situations. 90% of all of documents are signed online using an application. I do not suffer from bureaucracy, so it can be done. A lot depends on the managers at the ministry. I believe in the Ministry of Justice, they also have this digital format. It depends on management and the culture at the level of legislation, at the level of the cabinet of ministers. Enough is done to do everything online. So some bodies, they do this, some don't. So this depends on the management of these institutions. And government may also work online. And this year we were living in the online format. Only separate meetings were held in person. So we have deputies on digital transformation. They have their teams. So young specialists join. Those new specialists, it doesn't mean that they are actually young. It means that they are new in the sector. Do you search for people to build proper team? We have great HR team. We hired 100 people in contact center to help healthcare ministry to deal with COVID certificates issue. We have Daria team, and we have IT talented specialists. We involve them in the development of Daria. And we try to help other ministries. A lot depends on the trust to power, the cabinet of ministers. And we should provide proper compensations for people. A lot depends on different factors, whether you will be able to involve new specialists. There may be some mistakes in your horizontal interaction in your team. So this is last question from me. I know that in our country it is really difficult to plan even a year ahead, let alone 5 years. Let's look a year ahead. This is possible to plan. What are 3 main priorities in the Ministry of Digital Transformation? We have 4 priorities, actually. Okay. Till 2022, we would like to digitalize 70% of the most popular services. We may provide a list of those services. This is Plan 2 Dia.gov.ua. We have all plans of digital transformation there. Second, next year, we want to provide digital literacy to about 2 million Ukrainians. Because we should properly use different services, we should protect our personal data. We provided such education to 1 million. Next year, we would like to have 2 million. And also to provide fixed internet, 5 to 7%, and also to provide 5 or 7% more of mobile internet to those settlements where they have more than 500 people. So, so we would like to improve quality in order that people be able to feel this quality of internet connection. And Dear City project, this is the draft law to create the best digitalized system in the world, and we hope that the draft law will be adopted in the second reading and the system will be in place, and we will increase the share of IT in our economy from 4 to 6%. So I hope that the Minister of Justice will allow me to have some more time. If you look 5 years ahead, 4 priorities about next year and what will be in Ukraine concerning digitalization till 2024, for example. Yes, we have plans until 2024. We believe that state services will be provided online 100%. 95% of population should have access to internet. 6 million people get proper literacy, IT literacy, and 10% of IT and in our economy. We will be better than Estonia, we are faster than New Zealand, and more powerful in digitalization. And digitalization will provide more specialists, twice more than now, so we will be living with the feeling that we achieved a big goal. So we wish that your plans will come true and will be even cooler than Estonia, even for 3 years. So we wish you all the best. So we will have 2
Ми продовжуємо нашу дискусію.
We continue our today's discussion, and now we are going to speak about the future of Ukrainian demonopolization, how to do it correctly, how to carry out this activity, and whether it is done, and what to expect from different strategies of demonopolization during the next 2 or 5 years. So we would like to think what will happen in the nearest future. We have our guests here, the Minister of Justice of Ukraine, Daria Maliuska, Andrei Kaleniuk, head of Chief Investigative Unit at the National Anti-Corruption Bureau, Agiya Zagrebelska, Antitrust organization, and we will be later joined by Brian Bonner, former Kyiv Post editor-in-chief, and Eka Tkeshelashvili, chief of party at the USAID SACCI program financed by USAID to fight corruption in Ukraine. And now we're going to speak about fight against the oligarchs. Before we were speaking about fighting corruption, and can we separate these issues? I believe that they are interrelated, but we will try to divide these issues and discuss them separately. I would like to give the floor first to Denis Maliuska. Tell us, please, Denis, you developed the draft law on oligarchs, and now this is a law. It entered into force. What are the expectations concerning this draft, concerning this law for the next year? Let's imagine that we are now having the meeting next year, the same day. So first, I would like to thank you for your question. I'm not the author of the law. We have several authors, and the key author is the president himself. This is not an exaggeration. This is not like Brezhnev is everywhere. The key author and the bearer of the main ideas of this law is the president. This is for the first time the president was so involved in the development of the draft law. About some ideal goals that may be reached in a year. They were repeatedly declared. We do not have oligarchs in Ukraine. We have big business that do not interfere in politics and do not earn on state budget. So this is the aim of maybe any anti-monopoly legislation. So the monopoly, if it exists, it should not abuse the law, and the aim of this law is not to make rich poor or to take control over some flows of money or to replace oligarchs, but to create conditions for oligarchs in order that they won't be able to influence politics to get profit. So this is the law on oligarchs, and Ukrainian oligarchs differ from foreign oligarchs. They do not sign documents, they do not take any official decisions, and the law enforcement system cannot deal with them properly. They cannot carry out some investigative activities. They are under shield, and they have offshore shell companies to protect themselves. So this is the law on oligarchs. This is the first law that provides incentives to get rid of this oligarch status. It creates some risks for the status quo of oligarchs in the country. So this is the main idea of the law. And this is one of not many laws that have the article concerning this law in Wikipedia. So this information is available to the public. So oligarchs, they believe they are big business. And what about the number of the oligarchs? How many of them do we have? Maybe drug barons also believe they are big business. I do not know how many oligarchs we have. We have mechanisms for this that are envisaged by law. This term, oligarch, is not a street term now. This is not some part of political demagogy. It is the legal term, and I, as a Minister of Justice, I would like to provide a definition, legal definition. So oligarch is a person who will be in the register of oligarchs starting May next year. So in a year, we will have clear understanding. On the 7th of May, this law will be put into action, so there will be mechanisms in place concerning decision-taking, and we will have first results, first register, first list at the end of May. If everything goes in accordance with the plan, we won't introduce changes to the law. I would like to remind you that in December, there will be decision of the Venice Commission on this law, and evidently there will be some filing of cases to Constitutional Court. They will try to block the implementation of this law. So we have our plans, and we will see what will be next. Now we go to this. So Mr. Minister provided information about law enforcement bodies that it is difficult to deal with oligarchs. Whether it is the case, and is it possible whether law enforcement bodies be able to bring oligarchs to responsibility or to somehow harm their illegal activities, or whether they carry out some illegal activities? Good afternoon. Thank you very much for your question. This is the case. Persons who may be considered oligarchs, they are well protected by different means, starting from physical ones, technical ones, legal ones, and it's evident that all the cases, all proceedings concerning oligarchs, they are really difficult concerning investigation of these cases, because they are really complicated. Multi-stage actions are taken that bring criminal results, and a lot of people are involved. There are connections in power, and they counteract actively this investigation. And I would like to say that NABU, as a body, is dealing with cases that are connected with the persons that may be identified as oligarchs or those who protect their interests. And we deal with these cases for a long time. And there are cases, one of the first resonance case that was brought to court. This is the case of director of Zaporizhia titanium magnesium plant, and also private bank case that we investigate. Also resonance case is Rotterdam Plus case. Also the case of Samara Western direction. Sorry, I will interrupt you. So Firtash case and the private bank, this is Kolomoisky case, Samara case, pipeline, this is Medvedchuk. What else? Rotterdam Plus, this is Akhmetov. And we may also remember the cases concerning Bogdan Automobile Corporation. This is Petro Poroshenko. So I believe that the majority of persons who may be considered oligarchs, they are covered by our work. This work is done on a continuous basis. The number of cases that I've mentioned, they are considered in courts, and also charges were given, and the cases now are moving forward. And it's not easy to speak about the role in these cases of these oligarchs. But if we reveal that some corrupt actions were made to reach their goals, to provide for their interests, we do everything possible in order to bring those involved to criminal responsibility. This is not only about criminal responsibility for people, but you may also arrest or confiscate some assets. Of course, in all the cases where we identified losses, we arrest the property in accordance with the Constitutional Court decision. We also could file the cases concerning the contracts to, but we were deprived of this right. About confiscation, it is possible only by the decision of the court, and we want to arrest the property in order not to lose it. And we hope that based on the court hearings, this asset will be confiscated to the benefit of the state. But this pipeline was arrested, and now it is managed by the state. It is under the agency of asset management, and it provided to Ukrtransnafta enterprise. This is a real result of the work. Thank you, Andrei. And we've mentioned Rotterdam Plus case. This is a NABU case. And in this case, Liga Antitrust is involved, and Anti-Corruption Action Center is also trying to help in this case, to bring this case to court to be heard. And Mr. Minister said about anti-monopoly committee, and he only remembered it, but everyone speaks about anti-monopoly committee. What should be the role of this body? Does it implement its functions concerning the oligarchization, and what should be improved in this work? Thank you very much. Good afternoon.
Politics understood clearly that big business pays taxes, big business provides jobs, develops the regions, and actually big business is able to make pressure on politics. And that's why the role of governmental agencies is to make this division between big business and the governance and politics in any country, and competition bodies like anti-monopoly committee in the developed countries, they play big role. They have good experts in different sectors. They have good managers, and on the other hand, they set clear rules of the game. On the other hand, they are subject to strict selection. They are selected for limited term in office, and they are subject to very strict rules both for appointment and dismissal. In many aspects, Ukraine is different from developed countries because we have young market economy, and anti-monopoly committee started to develop only 28 years ago. And even now, many politicians and public at large do not clearly understand what is the public role of the anti-monopoly committee, but this role is quite clearly understood by the big businesses, and due to this understanding, they try to create very special conditions for the anti-monopoly committee, because otherwise it has to be a high barrier for the monopolies development in Ukraine. We saw a long story how the leadership of the anti-monopoly committee first had to be appointed by the parliament, then by the president, then how the notion of the criminal offense, anti-monopoly criminal offense was determined in legislation, etc. So as of today, we do not have so many anti-monopoly committee members who would stay in office for the whole term, and quite if you see decisions are sued to court, and I cannot recollect any political leader who would recognize that the reason of weak Ukrainian economy and high level of monopolization in it is the weak anti-monopoly committee. Thus, our politicians have to recognize that pursuing oligarchization and anti-monopolization, we should strengthen the anti-monopoly committee. The name of the AMC chairman should become of primary importance for us. We should require that AMC chairperson should be appointed after careful scrutiny, and that the employees of that body should be also subject of public attention. I may recollect you the scandal with anti-monopoly committee in the United States, and the scandal with E.ON in Germany, where Chancellor Merkel had to interfere. this both in both scandals where the regulators, that is anti-monopoly committees in the United States and in Germany, they preserved their decisions and the chairpersons of the bodies remained in office. We have to strengthen the powers of the committee. We have to strengthen its activity. We have to allocate more money for OMC because they drastically lack money for expertise. We should involve more consumers to OMC. We have to create a separate court chamber who would review the MC chambers, but all that improvements would change the situation without change of overall political approach to the AMC. In order to have a powerful AMC, we have to ensure its independence from politicians, not because politicians are corrupt, but because they interact with big businesses and they have quite different objectives than AMC. We have to prevent creation of huge market giants, that is, companies having a big market share. That is it in brief. Thank you. You pointed out to the main points of tension. You mentioned about courts and that AMC decisions were sued to court and that decisions were repealed, actually. Having created a strong AMC, may we expect that its decisions would become irrevocable in courts? As of today, we should say that AMC decisions are being repealed in courts due to the mistakes made by AMC itself. The second is that all the courts, they do not exist in vacuum. They rely on the general reputation of the bodies. That is, if AMC becomes strong, its decisions may become more well-grounded and more reputable, so to say. We also have to create special chambers and courts dealing with the AMC cases. Why we need them? Because they have to take into account huge bulk of economic information, while ordinary judges are not able to do this. That is, we have to produce specialized judges in anti-monopoly cases, and they should have a very specific approach to these economic cases. Later, we will invite the minister to refer and provide feedback about the idea of special anti-monopoly courts. Now, I would like to invite Eka Tkeshelashvili, Chief of Party at the USAID SACCI program. This is an anti-corruption project from USAID, and Before that, Eka was a chairperson in the European Anti-Corruption Initiative. Now my question to you, Eka. Today, we mentioned the audit or the opinion from the European Chamber of Accounts, which emphasized the need for European support to Ukraine. And in that report, in that review, much was said about the oligarchs and that body, that European body, expressed its dissatisfaction with the level of support from the European Union to Ukraine in its anti-oligarchs work. And I would ask you to speak more about de-oligarchization and where does the counteraction to corruption become the counteraction to oligarchs. So my question to you, to review that audit or report and to suggest what international partners could offer to Ukraine in support of the anti-oligarch and anti-corruption work. Thank you.
Thank you, Daria. Hello to everyone from the beautiful city of Jerusalem, where I have been here attending today a conference related to innovation and technologies and how that could help improvement of life for citizens, communities, including for better governance and then curbing corruption. And I just wanted to mention that for one reason, that I'm very pleased that Ukraine is very much in sync with major trends of development at the global scale. So all the issues that have been discussed today at your event, and generally the major trends in which Ukraine is engaged in, including in the field of digitalization, fight against corruption, striking the balance between efficiency and all the rights and freedoms that have to be engaged, is something that is very important for Ukraine, but is not unique when it comes to that to Ukraine as well. It's part of where the world is moving, and it's part of challenges and opportunities that so many communities around the globe engaged with and are facing. Now, when it comes to this particular question, I guess part of what is not frequently mentioned when we speak about the oligarchization is the core of the importance of that process from the point of view of a citizen, of an individual and members of the communities. It's not something that it needs to be looked primarily through the lens of the international community or through the lens of government, or even more so through the lens of who potentially could be themselves defined as oligarchs, but how citizens of Ukraine and public of Ukraine looks into that, and how they understand that it's not only an issue that relates to moral underpinnings of the free societies in a democracy, and is a top priority in so many ways when it comes to a fight against corruption for the society in Ukraine, but the tangible effect of success of this fight that it can have for everybody in Ukraine, especially for those who are disadvantaged the most when it comes to the level of life, economic potential, and realization of those potential currently in Ukraine. In other words, if Ukraine, and I'm convinced that Ukraine will be successful in this direction, will be successful in bringing up the system that is fair and just and provides a level play field for all, irrespective of who you are as an individual or how big you are as a business and how influential you could be on the market or on the political life in conjunction to that. In Ukraine, you have the same rules that I apply to everybody. That market is competitive, it's open, and it provides ground for creativity and opportunity for people to thrive. And when it comes to the basic services that need to be provided for realization of basic rights, when it comes to electricity, heating systems, normalcy of the social life, when it comes to how we all would see in the developed, not only developed, but developing countries on the trajectory of good development should be, how that is affected with the way if markets, if the rule-based societies are distorted or not in the way how rules are operating, whether or not anybody has a special status in a country, and how that could be changed. In other words, a bit of demystification of the oligarchization of Ukraine, I think, is needed, so that we break it down to different clusters and building blocks of what that pathway of Ukraine means for the country, for the government, for the society and individuals. And when you look at that from that perspective, you understand how complex this process is, but you understand that it's doable as well at the same time, so that if the plan is combined with the commitment of the government and the commitment of the society to be resilient and persistent in this direction, then there are all grounds to believe that one can be successful into that. You asked me about what international community could do more for that fight to be successful and whether or not it was sufficient. I can tell with full confidence that European Union, and I can tell with full confidence that the United States government have full commitment to help Ukraine to be successful in this fight and to provide all it takes as much as Ukraine asks for that assistance. I'm not here speaking on behalf of any of the governments or organizations, but I'm in the shoes of an implementer, so to say, who is tasked to do that job and who is tasked to provide that assistance. And this commitment is there. So more clarity is from the Ukrainian side as well, how fight can go in this direction. More assistance is provided, and then more assistance is successful in this direction. We talked about competitiveness of the markets, which is extremely important. There was a lot that has been mentioned on the Anti-Monopoly Committee, and I will not repeat that. But there are very important elements into the plan that government recently approved as a continuation of adoption of this law. And here we have very important directions in which further action needs to be done for that fight to be a meaningful one that could actually deliver. And the different sectors of the economy are identified, energy, for example, media sector, in terms of ensuring freedoms and then independence of media, but then in anti-corruption fields that can be branded anti-corruption per se in this direction. We can name a lot of initiatives, including with initiative related to the political lobbyism, related to political finance and transparency of that, resilience and strength and independence of anti-corruption framework. And I would want to add that when it comes to the guiding principles that relates to how anti-corruption measures can amplify reforms in the sectors that can promote openness of the markets and level playing field of the market, then the anti-corruption strategy that is awaiting for consideration and adoption of the Parliament with the second hearing provides very good guidance and concrete commitments that could certainly not only contribute, but then could ensure that the anti-corruption reforms actually serve that purpose of amplifying and ensuring that all the sectoral reforms are successful and they are based on the principles of transparency and accountability, and with that provide more efficiency and effectiveness of how they could deliver in shorter period of time rather than only in the long term at the end of the day. And final word, I would say that at times it is taken for granted that in Ukraine, civil society is very strong, very vibrant, as if, you know, you guys can do your job and then nothing more is needed to help and support you. I don't disagree with the fact that civil society is very vibrant and very capable in Ukraine, and you are great examples of that. But sustainability of that action is very important, so that you continue to do the job that you excelled doing in Ukraine, and in that sense provide constant watchdogging, constant help and guidance when it is accepted and well absorbed by the governmental institutions, and ensure that in that sense civil society serves the purpose for what it is known for in democracies and has the capacities to do so.
Thank you, Eka. Thank you for your remarks. We'll return back to you. I just want to continue with our panel, which is in person. Пане міністре, знову повернемося до вас.
Dear Minister, there was much expectation from the law against oligarchs. You mentioned that the president was a driver of this law, and you discussed this law from many aspects. Did you discuss the role of the anti-monopoly committee in de-oligarchization process? Because from Agiya's presentation, I understood that AMC is able to act even today.
Дякую за запитання.
Thank you for your question. We've discussed all this. I would like to say that there was big media campaign against this law to block its implementation. So they said that the power do not pay attention to classic means of fighting oligarchs, but this is not the case. So there is some criticism now, but systemically we started fighting oligarchs a long time ago. The law concerning Kaleniuk was adopted, and it created majority in the parliament, and also in the parliament a draft was registered, and it will become the law against let's say so, against Turkis, and this is about 10 billion private bank money that were taken out, and also this law is like the cherry on the cake. Also about the Anti-Monopoly Committee, last Wednesday the government adopted measures concerning the oligarchization, the key element of which is the increase of capabilities of Anti-Monopoly Committee. In the parliament they registered 2 draft laws that regulate this issue, and we understand the importance of Anti-Monopoly Committee in this fight against oligarchs and their abuse. There are a lot of means concerning improvement of financing and the independence of Anti-Monopoly Committee. For a long time we have been thinking to introduce a separate chamber or a court that would consider important cases, financial cases, anti-monopoly cases, where there is concentrated interests of oligarchs. And in the sphere where the Ministry of Justice works, where we work as a regulator and we use different administrative sanctions, the problem is that the majority of grave violations of law is done not because of lack of qualification, but because people want to do something corrupt. Those who violate the law, they clearly understand that they violate it. So this qualification is important, but what is the difference between the measures that were provided by the Cabinet of Ministers decision? Each measure has long time for implementation. And the main or the only criteria of truth is practice, as philosophers say. So whether it is anti-Kaleniuk or other laws or reforms, we will see this reaction, and this law on oligarchs, this is the biggest hit on the status quo in Ukrainian politics and economy. And we will increase the role of Anti-Monopoly Committee and of other regulators on energy, regulator on communication, and other regulators. And also the courts, the court should be more independent, more capable, more independent. And the expertise was also mentioned that anti-monopoly committee, they need this money for court expertise. And the capabilities of these specialists, these experts should be increased. And we see a big picture. We have some complex measures. We may move forward step by step, and it will take years. And there are mechanisms that are more quick. But anti-monopoly committee is a big priority. And the anti-monopoly committee provided for reform, and we will support the idea of enforcement of the role of anti-monopoly committee. Now question to Agiya. Whether this plan of actions of the government will strengthen anti-monopoly committee, will it help to fight oligarchs, and whether the draft laws mentioned by the minister will help in the reform of anti-monopoly committee. Unfortunately, draft laws on anti-monopoly, they are rather raw. The selection procedure remains the same, and the procedure of hiring and firing of these officials, they should provide for so this procedure remains non-transparent, and the grounds for firing remains the same, and it allows to fire these members of the committee because of some subjective decisions, and there were some cases of this. And those changes that are proposed, they do not touch these topics. Also, the anti-monopoly committee depends on the politicians, and the head of the anti-monopoly committee, the salary will depend on the assessment of the cabinet of ministers, and also there is dependence of anti-monopoly committee on politicians, on the budget committee and on the government that we have at the moment. And also anti-monopoly committee is more separated from the public, because those interests that our citizens have to participate in the anti-monopoly committee concerning compensation, participation in anti-monopoly processes. And when we separate the committee more from society, the society will pay less attention to the committee. The society won't feel the results of the work of anti-monopoly committee, and there will be less defenders in society concerning anti-monopoly committee, and there will be less publicity. So we see more negative aspects than positive aspects in this. And if we recall the memorandum of the IMF and newest memorandum, and those drafts, they implement only one recommendation concerning decisions of anti-monopoly committee. Other recommendations concerning hiring and firing and reinforcement of responsibilities of anti-monopoly committee, they are not met. Can we somehow amend these draft laws? Yes, we may do it before the second reading, and the deputies provided amendments to this draft, and this is the precedent when hundreds of amendments were submitted, and 90% of them, this is not drafts, not spam. These are real amendments to this draft law. I would like to say that monopoly in energy sphere is a popular topic now, and each objects of energy were bought with the decision of anti-monopoly committee. So they were not bought without. So the last permission was provided in 2021. 2 permissions were provided. These are previous were done in 2020 and before this, and now we have new transactions. We consider them in the committee. They are the first people in Forbes list. So the role of the anti-monopoly committee is really important in this process. So energy monopoly, this is Rinat Akhmetov, and he controls coal industry and electrical power plants. They were privatized by him with the permission of anti-monopoly committee. We have all copies of the decisions, and we have all decisions of the anti-monopoly committee, and starting the second president of Ukraine and concerning all the decisions, we didn't have any bans and in times of fifth president and sixth president, there were some bans when there were some people who were under sanctions. Then we banned some transactions, but in other transactions we provided permission. So when we speak about independence of anti-monopoly committee, and there should be proper guarantees of independence, do you work in anti-corruption agency? And these guarantees were provided, and we may compare these guarantees. Do they help? I mean, these guarantees, what are the main guarantees? What are more important, what are less important? Thank you for your question. Yes, I believe that they really help, they really protect us. Maybe you remember about the number of attempts to fire the head of the bureau, and in the result they were not successful, and this is due to the mechanisms provided by the law, these guarantees that prevented this biased attempt of firing. So these guarantees are really important. They provide the opportunity to do your work independently from interference of others. And maybe you know that we have a delayed process of selection of the head of specialized prosecutor's office, and this demonstrates that in this case the guarantees are not enough and mechanisms are not really good. And for a year we are working with prosecutor's office without the head of this agency. So the guarantees in SAPO are not properly adhered to, and we are waiting till the end of this contest in order to have this head of this institution in place. One more question to you. So if we are thinking about 5 years ahead, so what should be the strategy of Ukraine in fighting oligarchs? You are a person who is working in a National Anti-Corruption Bureau. What are 3 priorities for Ukraine? What should be done in order to have real demonopolization and de-oligarchization in Ukraine? I think, this is my subjective view, as a worker in this body, I would like to say that we should provide guarantees of independence and institutional capability of NABU, SAPO, and High Anti-Corruption Court. Also, I believe that we should complete the reform of the courts. We face this situation regularly. Interested parties use courts and they try to illegally interfere in our activity in the investigation of the cases. And the state regulators, they also should have plus minus the same guarantees of independence that would provide them opportunity to carry out their functions appropriately. Thank you. I have a question to Eka. Please, are you with us? Please. Brian Bourne was not able to join us, and in this law we should not forget about the media.
Говорити мені українською, добре. Я буду говорити українською.
Okay, you were speaking a lot about necessity to have this request of citizens for change, that citizens should understand what oligarchization means. And our citizens, they usually consume information from the sources that belong to oligarchs. We are speaking about national television. The biggest media in Ukraine belong to oligarchs, and they often use them in order to increase their influence or to decrease the influence of some politicians. If you're speaking about our international partners, how can the projects of international assistance provide for independence of the media and to increase the number of journalist investigations? I know that the European Anti-Corruption Initiative supported investigative journalists, and during previous panel we heard that in the regions there are not many investigative journalists. Workshops and trainings do not work, and it is difficult to provide these independent media outlets in the regions. It takes a lot of time. Наші гроші Lviv news outlet, they said that it takes a long time, about 3 years, to establish such centers in the region. So how can we stimulate these media in the regions to provide for this issue concerning oligarchs and how to deal with them?
To your question, to begin with, I would mention that when we talk about raising public awareness, and with that, they support to sometimes painful reforms that have to be undertaken, is that it needs to be very creative and multifaceted. It needs to be a combination of both positive stories that are well resonating with the people so that they understand that the change is possible in the country and it is being delivered. And it needs to be having a critical element of it as well, so that all that needs to be changed even more and is not changed yet is put on light, so that there is an understanding of what needs to be changed more. But beyond that, when we talk about oligarchic influences in the country and impact of that on economy, on everyday life of the citizens, that needs breakdown in a simplistic way to the people. And by simplistic, I mean in a positive way. ABCs of what it means for everyday life of a human being living in that condition. So if you pay for your electricity, if you pay for your heating systems, if your child goes to the school or university, how all of that is affected, and for an elder in terms of right to have, not the right, but possibility of having a free space for entrepreneurial activities without overshadowing of the big guys. what is the impact of all of that needs to be part of that process that will deliver better life in this regard. And I agree that investigative journalism is a very significant component of that. And it's particularly important to see how synergy between journalists, NGOs, and experts in the fields could deliver that at national and local level. And I would say that, echoing to what you said, that platforms where the content could be put from journalists, it's not that easy to obtain in the regions. So that synergy and collaboration could be one way of going forward with ensuring that it's not just the capacity development of the local journalists in different constituencies, small villages, big villages, cities, but then platforms where the content could be amplified that will be needed. And for that, obviously, assistance of international partners has been delivered, but then needs to be delivered even more in this direction. And I have to say that investigative journalism-related activities and support to the media per se, media actors, and not only NGOs, has been a big priority for the US government throughout the years, and will continue to be so as long as this need maintains to be the need in the country. But I have to emphasize that we have that responsibility, and by we I mean all of us in that ecosystem of reform promoters, I would say, to see how more creatively we can bring that content to an individual, to the societies in Ukraine in such a way, in different communities, that when we talk about anti-corruption measures, when we talk about anti-oligarchic law as a framework law that needs to unroll myriad of other measures to actually deliver the result that brings that level play field in politics, social life, media life, or in economy, then that's what it means for them. Now, in the midterm and in the long term. And it needs to be broken down in short narratives, easily understandable narratives that resonate with the everyday life. And by saying that, I want to emphasize that I don't say that because Ukrainian society doesn't care about strategic issues, about strategic direction of Ukraine's development. We've seen time and again how far Ukrainian society can go in being committed for that strategic change and trajectory of development of Ukraine. But at the end of the day, we all fight our fights in everyday life as well. And the same goes for ordinary families in Ukraine. And they need to see and comprehend in easily developed stories, narratives, content that when we talk about an initiative in any given field, this is what it actually means for you, for your everyday life, for your family. And I believe that that's part of this novel element of communication that we need to have in mind, apart from what we consider to be classics in terms of public awareness campaigns that be or investigative journalism in that regard.
Thank you, Eka. Дякую, Ека. Я думаю, що це в продовження вашого вислову демістифікація. Так?
I like demystification and de-oligarchization. De-oligarchization should be properly explained to people based on the everyday things, not just remotely. We still have several minutes left, and I would request you to express just a couple of words, and then we will wrap up. I'm not guilty. Was it a confession to NABU? What would you say to NABU? Actually, I don't think I can summarize it all in a couple of words. What I would like to do, I would like to wish us all to work together. I believe that oligarchs are able to capitalize on our ability ability or on our disability to get united, and on our weaknesses. And I would encourage everybody to become stronger and to get united. Super, thank you. I believe that many experts from the NGO would agree with you. Andrei. In NABU, we clearly understand how strongly the oligarchs' impact hampers Ukrainian development and how it prevents the rule of law in Ukraine. That's why we are keen to work hard within the scope of our mandate and to cope with that excessive influence. Very soon, the new NABU director will start. Agiya. I believe that I have to speak on behalf of the NGO sector. We are the most interested in de-oligarchization. Perhaps we are not able to formulate this in proper language formulas, but we clearly understand that the end payer for the corruption is an ordinary Ukrainian citizen. That's why we are the most motivated to tackle corruption and to implement de-oligarchization. That's why I encourage you to involve more people and to use this tool of collective filing to court. I believe that Ukrainian people know their rights and can become a partner of the state in anti-oligarch work. Eka, the floor is yours.
I'll end with a little bit of a joke, perhaps, but I think it was Charles Dickens, if I'm not mistaken, who said once that they didn't know that it was impossible, so they did it. I'm not saying that it's impossible, but this comes with this inherent enthusiasm and commitment that you don't take anything as a no, as an answer, then you don't take anything as impossibility in any difficult situation. And this is something that is a very strong character, I believe, of Ukrainian society to withstand and go through all the difficulties in history and now as well, and to come out of it even stronger than before. And I think that this is the time for us all to believe that this is what is the core when it comes to going through that difficult process, because at the end of the day, we're not talking about surviving, we're talking about thriving as a future for Ukraine. And that's only can be achieved if that enthusiasm, even sometimes naivete, but strong commitment and enthusiasm of taking everything as a possible rather than impossible is something that is needed. It's not very technical expert description that I gave you at the end of the day, but I think this is something that sometimes is overlooked and is quite a bit needed when it comes to self-assurance for the future.
Дякую, Ека. Дякую панелістам всім на цьому.
Thank you to all the panelists. Let's wrap up. Now, I would like to summarize just in few words. Now, 7 years after the Revolution of Dignity, we understood that our theory of change had worked, and we have created NABU, SAP, Anti-Corruption Court, and understood that the main procedure is a selection procedure. Very soon we will launch the judiciary reform, where again selection process will be monitored by proper watchdogs. Now we have clear markers for the movement forward. I hope that in 8 years from today, there will be no need to assist neither NABU nor SAP, and that anti-monopoly committee decisions won't be sued to court, and we believe that in future anti-monopoly committee will become strong, its leadership will be strong, and the chairperson of the anti-monopoly committee will be well known as the national hero even to the school children, and that we will have no more oligarchs who will become just big or small businesses or middle-sized businesses, but not oligarchs. That in 7-8 years, mass media will become truly independent, and people would not be tortured with propaganda, while people would be able to defend their interests and cause. And keeping in mind what Minister of Digitalization said, that we are dreaming that we will become even more digitalized than Estonia. Thank you.